Welcome to Fine Tuning with Drew Taylor, your one-stop shop when it comes to animation news and commentary. I'm Drew's co-host, entertainment writer Jim Hill, and Mr. Taylor and I are recording this show on Thursday, August 15th, 2019, which is 2 days after Angry Birds 2 opened in theaters on a Tuesday, Drew. I'm trying to remember the last time something opened in a theater on a Tuesday.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting interesting move. It changed its release date so last minute, too. Do you remember that? It was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. They were like, oh, we're opening 2 days early. So I don't know if that's sort of to capitalize on the like last minute school holidays or what. But yeah, it's pretty interesting.
I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I know that kids are going back to school in Florida. In fact, I think they went back to work last week or thereabouts. So, but it seemed to have done well. I mean, opening day pulled in 2.6 million worth of tickets here in North America. If you go over to Rotten Tomatoes, it's got a 73% freshness rating, which is a significant improvement over the first Angry Birds movie, which came out May 2016 and only managed to get a 44. Did you get to see it?
No, I haven't seen it yet. I never saw the first movie, but This is kind of the response to this one has kind of piqued my interest to watching the first one. Did you see it?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is that Josh Gad did a voice for it, and so I got to interview him out ahead of that, and this was back when Josh was getting ready to do his Sam Kinison movie, which I really wish he had gone forward with. I guess they weren't able to crack the script. But yeah, he seemed, pretty enthusiastic about it. So, I eventually saw it. It was entertaining, not the greatest thing I've ever seen, but I guess what it cost $73 million to make, sold 170 million worth of tickets in North America, 224 overseas, so worldwide gross of 352 million, so not really surprised we're getting a second one.
Right.
Kind of interesting to see that the cost on this one went down. I mean, it's 68 versus 73, but or it should be 65. But that suggests that they're running a tighter ship over at Sony these days. And let's see what else dropped in the last week or so. Rocco's Modern Life, Static Cling. We'd been talking about that.
Right.
What did you think?
I really liked it. I thought it was really fun. I thought it was the perfect amount of time, because if it was any longer, I don't think it would have been quite as successful. And it was extremely meta, which I was not expecting. And might clue you off as to why it did not air on Nickelodeon. It was a little bit more sophisticated, I think, than they were ready for. But I loved that there was the trans character. That was a big surprise. Mm-hmm. I thought it was very charming and funny.
I have to admit, though, in order for it to work, you really did have to be familiar with the original series. I didn't necessarily watch it as often as I could or should, so it didn't play quite as well for me. But I have to admit that the O-phone 9, 10 gag. Yeah. It's just sort of like, really, that's your right to the moment, satire. But I have to admit, I love the Rachel character, but at the same time, it makes me wonder, okay, if this was this way and Nickelodeon opted not to show it, what's the deal with Invader Zim? Isn't that later this month as well? Or?
It's tomorrow.
Oh, well, yeah. There we go. Okay.
Yeah. So we'll know soon enough.
Okay, well.
Yeah. It did make me kind of... It was sort of an acid flashback to 90s indie animation. So,
this is true. This is true.
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of flashbacks, and now we're going back to 82 with thereabouts, The Dark Crystal. Again, Jim Henson's attempt at doing a big, epic fantasy that, again, it's interesting. Henson fans and a lot of genre fans really love this film. Didn't necessarily do all that well at the box office, but time has been kind to it. And now here we have an Age of Resistance. It's a limited series, but, with potential for, what, a second or third, is that correct? Or?
Yeah. we're talking about it because there was this new trailer this week, which I thought was absolutely incredible. I never really connected with the Dark Crystal that much. I thought it was always kind of a little aloof emotionally, and obviously, if you read like the Brian J. Jones book on Jim Henson, you understand how fraught a project that was between how many people they had rewriting it, and there was a time when the whole movie was in a like elfin language. What
was it that the Skeksis supposedly spoke Egyptian? The Pod people spoke Polish. Yeah, it was an interesting idea. In fact, I think we've talked previously about the infamous screening where Jim Henson showed it for the executives at Universal, and they put all this time, all this effort into it, and the movie ends, and the Universal executives get out of the room without saying a word, and Henson bursts into tears during the screening room because it's fairly obvious what's about to happen. And so I guess for me it's interesting to have a prequel now.
Right.
And they made such a big deal about how the puppeteering was going to be done practically. But I think, again, one of the reasons that you and I are talking about this is if you watch that trailer, there's quite a bit of CG in this thing.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot, including full body characters and stuff like that. Yeah, it's really interesting, and it also has an interesting connection to animation because you'll remember that Genndy Tartakovsky was going to do a Dark Crystal movie at one point.
That's right.
Yeah, which what could have been.
You're breaking my heart again, Drew. Here, just sort of. All right, that's Primal's going to be my little life preserver to hang on to Kennedy gets back to work. All right. Well, speaking of giant figures in the animation world. One of them found themselves in the spotlight in not necessarily all that pleasant a way this week, and that was Simpson creator Matt Groening.
Yeah. But how do we feel about that?
Well, I mean, I was telling Nancy the story in the car the other day when we were headed to a doctor's appointment. And the problem is that, for those of you who don't know, folks, it was Matt Groening accepted a ride on Jeffrey Epstein, and not the Disney publicist Jeffrey Epstein's name, but the gentleman who died under kind of interesting circumstances this past weekend.
Right.
He accepted a ride on this plane, I want to say from San Francisco down to L.A., or I forget the exact circumstances. So not a very long plane trip. And, but I guess on board was one of Mr. Epstein's young ladies. And I guess Jeffrey insisted that she give Matt Groening a foot massage. And, and the thing is, this woman's diary got published as part of the investigation as Epstein was arrested. And have you read the diary excerpt, Drew? Or?
I believe I read the excerpt. Yeah.
As a guy in his 1960s, or excuse me, a guy in his 60s, she describes the fact that she had him take off his shoes, and he took off his socks, and there was little white fuzz on them, and he had gnarled yellow. Yeah. Toenails, and it's one of these things where it's like, it's like, well, this must have been a pleasure. But she goes off, she gets a washcloth, and she cleans off his feet, gives him a foot massage, and as a thank you, Matt draws a picture of Homer, a picture of Bart, autographs him for her father and her brother, and then the flight's over and he's gone. And it's like, as far as scandalous stories go, it's gross. I don't know how actually scandalous it is, but I think you and I were talking. The reason we're bringing this up is that, what is it, Saturday, August 24th, at the D23 Expo, there's going to be a big panel, basically, again, as part of that $71.3 billion acquisition of Fox, The Simpsons became part of the Disney family. And so Matt's supposed to be on stage there as the creator, talking up these characters. And I think you and I were both kind of wondering, is this enough of a story to say have Matt suddenly be busy with his family or have a health issue and not attend? Or what do you think?
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you and I have both been told that this is like the big coming out party for The Simpsons, basically. Like they're joining the family. This is a big to do. So it would be interesting if that kind of derailed it. And I mean, it is a really weird, creepy story, but I think the bigger issue is like, how close did he have to be to Jeffrey Epstein to get invited on this plane? Yeah. Was this something that he just kind of handed out to people? Or is this, indicative of a larger issue that could potentially be uncovered now that he's dead and, everybody's going to be coming out of the woodwork to tell the stories of what went on. But it's interesting. I mean, that you've seen the animation community rocked by a number of kind of, sexual harassment scandals, whether it's the Loud House guy or John Kay and all those stories that were coming out about him last year. So it's kind of interesting to put in that context too, of like where that kind of fits in. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he shows up.
Yeah, and let's be honest also that this is going to be the first D23 Expo without John Lasseter.
Yeah.
And John, how many of those presentations did you go to, Drew, where there's John on stage with his T-shirt cannon and, in front of a crowd where he's a rock star?
Last D23, do you remember the... you were there, right? The last year?
That it was.
Do you remember the exhibition of all of his Hawaiian shirts?
Good Lord, you're right.
And then they sold a new Hawaiian shirt for $200. And now every time I see somebody walking around in one of those shirts, I'm just like, why are you wearing that? Like, that is the most tone-deaf thing you can do. But it's true. I mean, he was the star of the annual, animation presentation. He often seemed like he'd had a few drinks before he went on, but nonetheless. And people treated him like a rock star. I remember talking to a friend of mine, a publicist at Pixar last time at the Pixar booth, and he walked up, and there was just this swarm of people around him. Like, he was really a Beatle at D23. So... now, not so much.
Well, I have to wonder because, face it, this is going to be the first time, basically, Pete Docter's debut as the new face of Pixar. And just going to be interesting to see what he does and how he does it.
Well, I mean, I think if we see any footage from Soul, that'll say a lot more than he could ever say, because I feel like that movie's going to be really awesome based on what I've heard and seen from it. So... I'm excited.
Okay. Well, here's hoping. Anyway, doubling back on Fox, just last week we had Disney announce its third quarter earnings, and it's ironic that this is Disney Studios. Okay. In fact, what was it? Just earlier this week, Lion King blew past Frozen to be that's a funny thing unto itself, is that initially the talk was that because Jon Favreau's photoreal Lion King had earned $1.3 billion, it was now Disney. It had passed Frozen, the original Frozen released in 2013, as Disney's top earning animated film. And were you intrigued by the fact that Disney actually pushed back to the fact that, well, no, it's not an animated film,
I saw that. They were like, it's our top grossing live action movie. Yeah, and it was like, wait, what?
That's a one shot.
Yeah,
you get a one shot out of it. But yeah, I mean, you have all these billion-dollar earning films this year. Endgame with $2 billion, and Captain Marvel with $1.128 billion, and even Spider-Man: Far From Home, because it's a Columbia Marvel Studios co-production. Some of that money's going into Disney's pocket, and of course, you and I have talked about Guy Ritchie's Aladdin and Toy Story 4. But interesting thing, you have that many billion-dollar earnings. But you still Wall Street still was disappointed with how Disney did in its third quarter. And some of that was due to a weaker than expected performances from parks and resorts. And we've kind of talked about Galaxy's Edge previously. But the more interesting thing is that people were quick to point at Fox and, the whole notion of, there's these costs with the merger and they've got to shut down all of these films that Fox had in development. And it's just sort of like, really? This is the story? That people are surprised when you buy another company and attempt to merge it with your company, that there are going to be unexpected costs and, folding divisions in one another and separation packages and that sort of thing. I mean,
yeah, it's not like when you bought Lucasfilm and you made back the $4 billion on one movie. You know what I mean? It's like, this is a long game. And you were saying before we started about all the kind of growing pains of the ABC Capital Cities acquisition.
Yeah. I mean, people forget that, back in July of 1995, when Disney announced that they were going to buy Cap Cities for $19 billion, it took them till February of 96 to complete the acquisition. But as late as August of 99, in fact, the Los Angeles Times has this great story about how there are key personnel who work for ABC, big-time executives that were, thought to be a crucial part of the network's success, who were refusing to move from New York to L.A. In fact, I think this was just after Disney built the new ABC headquarters right next to now it's the Roy E. Disney building. But, here they built this marvelous new headquarters, and it's like, no, I live in New York. I'm not moving to L.A. So, if people are expecting that the costs of merging Disney with Fox, or the personnel problems, or, all of those issues are going to go away anytime soon, it's like, there'll be years yet before this is actually resolved. So...
Oh, you know what I wanted to bring up that we didn't even talk about before the show, but you saw that Viacom and Paramount have merged.
Yes.
Or not, Viacom and CBS have merged. Do we think that this will finally get Paramount Animation in a better place?
Oh, boy. I honestly don't know. I mean, that's... In fact, second half of today's show, we're going to talk about the big news coming out of Disney in regard to Blue Sky. But yeah, what was fascinating to me was that, I'm sure you saw the same articles that I did, that it's like, okay, so Viacom and CBS are together, and now Star Trek, and appropriately enough, given that you're the guy who does Light the Fuse, that, Mission Impossible is, going to be, one of these big franchises that's going to put gas in the tank for the new Viacom CBS.
Yeah, they said it will be expanded across all platforms. And you should see that nobody really reported that stuff about Mission Impossible, and I tweeted about it, and people are so mad. It's really interesting. They're like, well, they're going to ruin it. They're going to... And it's like, I don't know. Do you have CBS All Access? Because it's a really terrific platform.
Well, I have to admit that, we watched the first season of Star Trek Discovery, and, and every so often, especially with Picard looming, it's like, I turned to Nancy, it's like, we really have to do season 2 of Discovery. I mean, it's Captain Pike. We got to catch up. And it just sort of like, it's like, well, there is that whole laundry, going to the doctor, shoveling snow thing. You have other parts of your life. It's just the whole notion of, do I have time for 10 hours of television? And Nancy's nieces were just out in Las Vegas for the Star Trek convention, and they were talking, they did full presentations about Picard, they did full presentations about Lower Decks. By the way, that's an animated series, Drew, so that's in our wheelhouse.
Yep.
But yeah, it just sort of, I don't know, from the Mission Impossible side of the fence, it was like the Paramount Park news that broke out of the UK, and how supposedly there's going to be a Mission Impossible attraction there, and
yeah,
I don't know.
Now it looks like that one could open before the South Korea park.
Really,
it's all very interesting. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, but I don't know. I feel like, we talked about Garfield becoming a part of the Nickelodeon staple last week.
Yep.
And obviously Nickelodeon Films is something that they've been trying to kind of get off the ground, and the only real success with that are the SpongeBob movies. We've got another SpongeBob movie next year. We've got the Sonic the Hedgehog movie next year. I don't know. I wonder if there is going to be sort of an infusion of creativity from the TV side into the feature side, and not just in terms of adaptations, but just in terms of personnel and borrowing people from these shows. And I don't know. I really wonder if it's going to finally... Because you and I mean, we could do 10 episodes about the kind of ups and downs of Paramount animation.
Oh, absolutely. But more to the point, just it's the notion of how does a Paramount animation in this hyper-competitive field of animation right now carve out a distinct identity for itself? Because let's face it, this is kind of the situation that Blue Sky is in now that Disney has decided to really get behind that studio. And I'll tell you what, folks, Drew and I will talk at length about that when we get back from this commercial break.
Getting ready to step into your career era? Set yourself apart with Adobe Creative Cloud Pro for students. Hone your skills with apps like Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro, and more, powered with the latest in creative AI. Students save over 55%, so you can build a portfolio you're proud of. Launch your future with Adobe Creative Cloud Pro for students. Visit adobe.com/students to learn more.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Carvana lets you buy your next car on your terms. Explore a massive inventory online, filter for what matters, and find your perfect match. Then choose delivery to your home or pick it up at one of Carvana's iconic car vending machines. Every car also comes with a 7-day money-back guarantee, so you can make sure it's the right fit. Buy your car on Carvana. Delivery or pickup fees may apply. Limitations and exclusions may apply. See our 7-day return policy at Carvana.com.
Carvana.
And we're back. But before we leap into the Paramount, Disney, DreamWorks conundrum, okay, we were talking a little bit about Frozen before we get started here, because obviously Frozen 2 supposedly is going to be Disney's next billion-dollar earner, along with, Rise of Skywalker, or at least that's what the folks at the studio seem to think.
And let's be honest, if Maleficent overperforms... I mean, we could look at a studio with $10 billion grossing movies. I mean, that's pretty incredible.
That is. And but I think you and I have also talked about how that puts tremendous pressure on the studio for 2020. And, frankly, it just doesn't look like they have that sort of gas in the tank for next year. Anyway, getting to... Frozen 2, just a couple of days ago, that there was all this hoopla about we're 100 days away from the November 22nd release date of this Chris Buck, Jennifer Lee movie. And back on August 10th, did you see this thing that Kristen Anderson Lopez put out?
I did, and when I saw it in your notes, I was like, yeah, I saw that too. Very interesting.
Yeah, so on the 10th, Kristen tweets out, "I can't tell you anything, but something super exciting and magically musical happened today." And then, as a follow-up, on the 11th, she can say, "I can tell you it had everything to do with Frozen 2." And then one of, I guess, her followers who knows Josh Gad, Tech Girl, came back and said, "Josh Gad said that the music and songs for Frozen 2 are even better than the first movie. Seeing what you and Bobby did for the Broadway musical, I'm not sure my heart can take it." And while
that's your favorite Broadway show, Jim, right?
You're so mean. But speaking of the Broadway show, the national tour of Frozen the musical kicks off in Schenectady, New York, in November 10th through the 14th. And then, Drew, it heads right to your neighborhood. I know. It's going to L.A. and to the Pantages Theater from December 4th to February 2nd, 2020.
I would love to see it. Yeah, if anybody out there is listening and wants to, throw me a couple tickets, I would love to go, and I'll talk about it on the show. But, yeah.
Well, if you ever get back to visiting Mom in Connecticut, they have jiggered the schedule a little bit for Broadway. In fact, it's starting on August 27th. they're dropping their Wednesday matinee in favor of a Sunday evening performance.
Interesting.
Well, it's weird. Beauty and the Beast back in the day, especially after it moved to the Lunt-Fontanne, did the same thing. And I'm told that this is kind of being done because, as of August 27th, the kids are largely back in school. The tourists have gone home. And, by scheduling a Sunday night performance, and in fact, on Sundays, Frozen will be presented on Broadway. There'll be a 1 p.m. matinee and a 6:30 evening performance. But, there aren't a whole lot of shows on Broadway that do performances on Sunday night, so you can effectively sort of sop up people who are looking for a theater ticket that night.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, speaking of Broadway, I forgot to tell you this on the show, but I talked to Matt Frewer a few weeks ago, and I asked him about the crazy Hercules premiere.
Oh.
Which I'm obsessed with.
Yes, as it should be. Okay.
Yeah, and he said he was there, and it was the craziest thing he'd ever been to. But, just as an aside.
And remember, we are just a week or so out now from Hercules, the Shakespeare in the Park production.
You're not going, though, right?
Drew, I have been trapped in this house all summer. Okay, if I have to walk there and sit there to get my free ticket, I will do it. It just...
Well, that's sort of the issue with why I didn't go, is because I don't want to... It's a first come, first serve...
It is.
Thing, so...
On the other hand, if someone at Disney Theatrical wants to take pity on me, who am I to say? Who wants to see a fat man sit by a wall in the park for hours and get sunburned? Okay. All right. What else we got? Oh, well, again, let's talk about the big announcement. Face it, you and I have been watching Spies in Disguise being retooled. We talked about how, the release date got pushed back to, for the, third time to December of this year. And Mark Ronson was brought in to redo the music. And we saw Reba McEntire. And I forget the other person who was brought in to, do new voices for the film. So that suggested that this Disney was taking a much more active, hands-on position with what Blue Sky was doing, but we definitely got that confirmed. 6 days ago when what was it? Alan Horn and Alan Bergman announced the Disney Studio president, Andrew Milstein, was being named as the co-president of Blue Sky Studios. So, and not only that, but Clark Spencer, who I think you and I both,
love Clark.
Yeah. He got promoted when the company is going to be that much more hands-on at Disney Studios. But it does kind of speak volumes about the fact that, okay, face it, you and I have talked about, where does a Blue Sky Studios fit with the Disney that has a Pixar as well as feature animation? And
right,
it looks like Disney's at least going to make a run at it. The fact that, Andrew's now in the mix there, and, he's been at the studio for years.
Yeah, he's great. I mean, under his leadership, we've seen the kind of reemergence of Walt Disney Animation Studios as a real creative force, both within the company and then in, the animation scene at large. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. But this issue of the identity of each studio is really something, because it's not going to boil down to just DTV stuff that Disney Toon Studios was doing. It doesn't seem like it's going to be that simple.
No. In fact, that with now adding a Blue Sky Studios to the repertoire, I wonder if we're going to see a refocusing of both what Pixar does and what Walt Disney Animation Studio does in response to, we got to create a role, a position for Blue Sky. And you and I have talked a little bit about this off air, but
right.
Let's face it. If you look at the last 5 to 10 years worth of Disney films, it's going to remember when John Lasseter came through the door in January of 2006 and became the Ubermeister of Disney animation. There were a couple of shaky years there where we had Chris Sanders chased off of American Dog, which became Bolt, and all the work that was done on Meet the Robinsons to try to get it to, in some sort of shape. And then we we finally started to get the sort of the Lasseter era versions of Disney films, and it did take them a while to sort of, figure out what would work. And, I would argue out of that pile, the most Disney of those films, what do you think? Tangled and Frozen?
And Moana.
And Moana.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the current Walt Disney Animation Studios output is either like, there's sort of two paths, and one of them is like super modern, like Zootopia, Wreck-It Ralph, Big Hero 6, and then the other one is much more classically Disney, which is the Tangled, the Frozen, and the Moana. And it's really interesting to see those two kind of paths, and I don't know if that was a conscious choice, like if someone's saying, okay, one of these, but it really feels like that to me, at least,
And let's be completely honest here. A Big Hero 6, a Wreck-It Ralph, and likewise a Zootopia, I think, quite honestly, could have just as easily gone on under the Pixar label. Whereas if you look at the Pixar side of the fence, Brave could just as easily have gone out under the Disney label.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's very little dissimilar from Brave to Tangled, except that one is an out and out musical. I guess that's really the only thing that sets it apart.
Well, and in fact, don't you and I keep hearing about the Pixar musical?
Well, they've been trying to do a Pixar musical since Coco. Was Coco originally a musical?
Yeah. I remember hearing at one point they were 11 or 12 songs for Coco.
Wow.
In fact, it's interesting that we brought up the D23 Expo, because remember when they did the shoebox version of Coco, they showed that amazing
highlight. It's my favorite thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And, they basically, the camera, this continuous camera move that took you through the world of the dead and all of these dancing, singing characters. And it's like, holy cow, this would have been amazing. Or likewise, I think they actually included as part of the cut scenes on Coco. They show the dinner theater show.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Yeah, so, but of course, the irony is that, when they talked about, the original Pixar film Toy Story, one of the rules for that film was no happy village, no, no, what a trouble to the rest of us is Belle. It's like, no, we're not making that movie.
Right.
So, face it, Lasseter was the taste master, the final call on so many story decisions and all that, and for me, it was kind of interesting to watch people talk about Toy Story 4 and sort of walk around the notion that maybe the reason this one didn't exactly stick the landing like 2 or 3 was because John was gone.
That's bull pucky.
Okay, all right.
You haven't watched it yet, have you?
I'm getting there. On my way back from Hercules in New York, I will find a place that this is showing. But let's also be honest, though, that Disney and Pixar, with the Blue Sky situation, if we turn our attention to Comcast, they're dealing, honestly, with the exact same issue in regards to Illuminations and DreamWorks. Pretty much the same thing. I mean, that they pay $3.6 billion for DreamWorks back in April of 2016, and it's not. It's what is it? 2 months later, they're talking about how, here comes Shrek 5, and Chris Melandri is going to be involved with the reboot of Shrek 5 and Puss in Boots.
Right.
And in fact, if you look at their upcoming schedule, I mean, you've talked about Abominable and, how wonderful that looks and that sort of thing. But once we start looking at DreamWorks release schedule for, 2020 and beyond, it's, April 2020 is Trolls World Tour, and then December of that same...
Which I cannot wait. I can't wait for Trolls World Tour.
I have to admit, I love the trailer, and also, to be honest, if I'm blipping around the television, the channels and land on Trolls, especially in the final dining room scene, that's it. 5 to 10 minutes of my life is gone. I can't tell you how many times I've watched that scene.
Right.
But yeah, we've got Croods 2, December of next year, March of 2021. We've got Boss Baby 2. We don't get our original DreamWorks Spooky Jack till September 2021.
Which is interesting because that's a Blumhouse co-production.
Yeah.
I must say when I was at DreamWorks a few weeks ago, I saw art from Trolls and Croods on the wall, which goes along with my really annoying habit of getting lost coming back from the bathroom. But,
I always applaud that instinct.
But some of the stuff was really incredible. So I'm very. I hope at the very least they'll kind of expand things with this. I don't know who wants another Boss Baby movie, quite frankly. But
it's so interesting you say that, because just last night, Boss Baby was on, and again, same thing. Just sort of looking for something to watch at 10 o'clock at night, and it was the chase scene, where the kids on training wheels and the other babies are dealing with the very Chuck Jones looking hood who's dressed as Mary Poppins at the time.
Right.
And it had some wonderful design and some really clever animation, and it just, I think the weird thing with Boss Baby is if you're watching it just in chunks, there's just some amazing stuff, and it's such amazing design. So, if they're going to circle back to this world, I'll check it out.
Right.
It won't necessarily be right at the top of the list, but I'll definitely check it out. But again, I circle back to our point. How do you delineate, especially now with Chris in kind of the John Lasseter position, what an Illumination film is versus what's a DreamWorks film? And
right.
And when I look at this schedule, for the next 2 years or so, I see, at least on the DreamWorks side, especially with a Shrek 5 out there kind of still finding its way, at least on the DreamWorks side, they seem to be leaning into their established franchise.
Right.
But at the same time, if you look to the Illumination side of the fence, we've got, Minions 2 coming? Is there officially a Despicable 4 now, or?
Well, it sounds like Minions and Despicable 4 have kind of coalesced into one thing.
Okay.
Because it's called Rise of Gru.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels like that's kind of the next Despicable Me, but you've got another Sing coming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You were supposed to get a third Pets, but I don't think that's going to happen anymore.
I think everybody was kind of surprised by that. In fact, it's interesting, talking about, of course, Comcast, buying DreamWorks Animation, and one of the reasons they did this, in fact, I have the quote here from, let's see, this is the head of Comcast, Steve Burke, talking about, the overall goal is to maximize revenues by creating popular characters that can be licensed out for lucrative spin-off merchandise and theme park attractions. And, if you've heard the stories about what's being prepped for Epic Universe, the fourth third theme park and one water park, that's in the works for Universal Orlando. There was a How to Train Your Dragon world, or there still is a How to Train Your Dragon world. But, on the heels of what just happened with Hidden World, it's like, wow, do we really want to go there still?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And the only you haven't done the Kung Fu Panda attraction yet either, have you? In Hollywood,
I am due to get out to LA this fall, and hope to get over there. In fact, that's what's kind of interesting about that, is that the story has been that was supposed to come into Universal Studios Florida as the replacement for Shrek 4D.
Mm-hmm.
But now the thinking was that, I guess the original plan was the front of the park was going to be an Illuminations entertainment district, and Shrek 4D was going to go away, and it was going to be replaced by the The Secret Life of Pets off the leash attraction that's opening at Universal Studios Hollywood next summer. But as you just mentioned, with How to Train Your Pets 2 underperforming at the box office, you can understand why Comcast might be a little hesitant to, be going forward with that plan, and maybe will be circling back around to the Kung Fu Panda attraction, the 3D movie replacing Shrek.
Yeah, although that's kind of lackluster, though, too. I mean, there's never a wait for that, really.
I guess what's ironic is I've heard from so many friends at the pre-show where you basically have all of the DreamWorks characters squabbling about whose movie is going to be is so much more entertaining than the actual movie.
Correct. Yes.
So I don't know.
Well, the other thing that's kind of interesting is that we talked about this last time, but Bento Box was purchased by 20th Century, whatever the remaining new Fox. And Disney is releasing a Bob's Burgers movie next year. And then I've heard, I know that we talked a little bit about this, but that Locksmith, the British studio, which is doing a movie called Ron's Gone Wrong next year, that Disney is releasing, they've severed ties with them. But I'm sure you're also hearing that one of the announcements that's supposed to come out of that Simpsons panel is the official announcement for the second movie.
Woof. Wow.
Yeah, the second Simpsons movie. So that, again, is like, who's producing that? It's really interesting.
And I hate to say it, but coming out of this year with so many sequels not connecting or underperforming at the box office, I would think, if I were Chris Melandri and, I was trying to figure out, what to do with my two animation studios, Illuminations and DreamWorks, how do you differentiate those two? How do you sharpen the focus and make sure that people look at that and think, oh, I gotta go see that movie? And The Simpsons, if they're announcing a brand new Simpsons movie, on August 24th at this panel. So what? Realistically, 18 months, 2 years, right?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. And that's if they find room in the schedule for it.
Okay.
Because now, they're programming 10 more movies a year with the Fox title. So it could be a great incentive to go on Disney Plus, but I mean, I don't know if they're going to put all that effort and then just debut it on Disney Plus, because it feels like that could be a really big hit, like theatrical movie. So
it could, but at the same time, let's be blunt here, Drew. 18 months from now, 31st season of The Simpsons starts this September. So 18 months, 2 years, 33 years on the air. First of all, what story is left to tell at this point? In fact, speaking of which, though, did you hear that? In fact, I think it's the Springfield Confidential book. Did we talk about this? About, I guess, 15 years in, they seriously thought that the show was finally going to end production, and so they were discussing what the last episode of The Simpsons should be.
No, I don't. I think I read another book. I think I read the unauthorized history of The Simpsons. But no, tell me the story.
Well, it's supposedly one of the ideas they toyed with for the final Simpsons episode was that Bart finally learns that Homer actually is Krusty the Clown. His biggest hero and the man who's the hugest disappointment in his life are the exact same person. The notion is that Homer, his entire life, has been leading this double life to be this character. And there's precedent. There's that episode where Homer was sort of the Krusty the Clown.
Well, yeah, and I think when they initially pitched the show, that was supposed to be the idea, which is why their design is exactly the same.
Yeah. So, it would be kind of cool for, if they did, in fact, circle back on that for Simpsons too. But, oh, dear Lord. I mean, upside is, you have a lot of nervous animation executives trying to figure out, how to move forward here in this extra competitive environment. But for our side of the fence, it's all good because we have lots and lots of stuff to talk about in future episodes of this podcast.
And I think that D23 will illuminate not to use a pun here, but the different approaches that Pixar and Disney Animation will provide, because we don't know anything about the next few Disney Animation movies. So
no, that's I have to admit, going to be a lot of news coming out in just 2 weeks' time, folks, and Drew and I will be sharing this. But until that time, Drew, if people want to hear more from you, what's going on the Light Fuse side of the fence?
This week we have a great interview with Mo Shafiq from Mondo, who has put out the first album, the first soundtrack, and the sixth soundtrack on great vinyl. And he talks a little bit about that process, about what's coming out in terms of merchandise from Mondo. And it's actually a really good, really informative episode that we were kind of surprised by. We had Mo as our first guest, actually, but so to hear, because there's no merchandise for Mission Impossible either, so we're always so excited about stuff coming out, and these vinyl releases are amazing. So definitely check that out. And then we just got a really big guest confirmed, but I can't talk about who that is yet, but a lot of cool stuff around the corner for sure.
It's always such an interesting show. Okay, we'll can't wait for that and your big surprise guest. On my side of the fence, the usual crud, folks. We got the show that started it all, Disney Dish with Len Testa. We have, let's see, a Universal Joint with Dustin Fuse. We have Looking at Lucasfilm with Dan Z. We have I Want That with Michelle Valladolid. We actually recorded one, folks. It'll be out shortly. And, of course, Marvel Us Disney with the amazing Aaron Adams. And, of course, the podcast you're listening to right now. Tell you what, if you want to do Drew and I a favor, please head over to iTunes and rate and recommend not only Fine Tuning, but also Light the Fuse. And if you really, really, really like what we do here, if you could head over to Bandcamp and subscribe, that would help keep the lights on, so to speak. And I guess that'll do it for this week, Drew. And
we'll have to record like a live episode or something out of D23 next week. Even though you won't be there, I can call in and
okay, but
yeah,
let's do that. I'd love to hear you calling in from the echoey Anaheim Convention Center floor. So, all right. Until then, folks, thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon.